Did you know that on YouTube, every minute, there are 400 hours of video uploaded? And you chose this one. Thank you. Like from the time the video started up until now, there's been like 15 hours of footage uploaded to YouTube. That's insane. Today, we're looking at a Honda EB3500 generator. It actually picks up on Craigslist of all places, even though I've made some massive exodus from there since Facebook Marketplace over the last few years. It's just too spammed. I remember when I got my Facebook account up and running, I didn't have access to Facebook Marketplace right away because the way that it works is they make you have so many posts and likes and friends and interactions and engagements with the platform. That way companies can't just mass produce account after account after account and just spam it. So they like to protect it a little bit, which is good. It was only posted for a couple days. Actually, it might have been only a day. And it was $85. I messaged him right away. It sat for a while. These generators sit for periods of time. They just don't get used. This one is equipped with both 120 and 240. It can't really power your whole home, but I mean, it'll get you through in a pinch. It'll run the sump and the furnace and the fridge, maybe a couple other things. So it's not designed to have an extreme load, but it is a Honda, and Honda's crazy. We love you, Honda. So thank you coming along for this journey. Let's see if it comes back. I'm not gonna check for spark, just because the person before that had it, they had this air box off. It doesn't really worry me too much yet. I won't jump to conclusions. So they were obviously messing with it somehow. Maybe tried spraying carb cleaner in the mouth of it, thinking that was gonna clean it, when in actuality you have to take the entire float and carburetor apart. So I'm not gonna jump too conclusively to the worst possible scenario, but just because it's there, I'm just gonna throw some fuel in there and pull over and see what happens. I forgot to mention too, it's probably like a $300 to a $500 machine. Really depends on who's willing to pay what for it. Let's just pull that choke. Got some fuel in there. Let's just give it a yank. All right, let's see what happens. Cool. All right, let's do it one more time. And I got a little light plugged in, so we'll know if that pops on. We are probably not going to face too many electrical issues. All right, round two, fight. Cool. All right, let's get that carb off there. All right, this throttle cable will pop up and off. Okay, the only thing left that's hanging us up is this little clip, this fuel line. Bet you're just dying to know what's in that FedEx box over there. What's that movie? Castaway, that FedEx box that keeps him alive, that he wants to make the delivery to in the end, and he does. I remember she was just like super chill about it. She was just like, oh, thanks. He gave her some like huge story about how it like saved his life, and she was just like, oh, yeah, you're a little late, but thanks. I don't think anything's gonna come out of here, but we'll see. A little bit. That gas actually looks really good. Very clean. Let's get that off, and then there's a shut-off solenoid that we'll get off of there too. I just remember there was a Super Bowl commercial making fun of that Castaway scene. I just remember that the guy shows up and he was like, well, I just curious, what was in that box? And it was like a satellite phone, matches, fishing wire. He was just like, whoa, what? Oh boy. Oh boy, this shutoff solenoid thing is just absolutely stripped. I think I'm going to get that off there by myself. There's the bad gas. I just tipped it upside down. I don't know if that's showing up as well as it could. See how that is like a really, really white, bright. See that like little bit of darker right there? That is much darker fuel than what came out of the fuel line. I'm looking at the camera screen. That is not doing any justice. That looks the same color as the light. Maybe I shut off that light. That might show up a little bit better. You know what happens a lot of times with these carburetors is that people will store them with the tanks empty, but the carb is still full, which really makes no difference because carb is the most important part anyways. There we go. That was a little bit easier than I thought it was going to be. I think we should be able to get the screwdriver on it enough now. Yeah. It's one of those limiter caps on there. One little tip that I'll share while I'm kind of taking this apart. If you're ever buying something that's non-running and somebody says, I clean the carb, just be mindful of what they mean. Some people's version of clean the carb means just while it's running, spray carb spray into the mouth of the carburetor, just like, like sea foam. And carb spray can combust. So somebody can, yikes. Somebody can think they're cleaning it when they're really not. I don't know if you see in there. Yeah. That's a Bruce Banner fuel. Bruce Banner is the Hulk, by the way, and he's green. That's why I use that reference for you non-Avenger fans. Sometimes those are brass. Brass is very soft. If you're not familiar with metal attitudes, that can be stripped very easily. Very gentle. All right, I think we got it. Sometimes I will say, don't fight it too hard, just leave it. You'll do yourself a favor. I've had to use like easy outs on these before, and it's possible, but it is not fun. I think Honda calls this a valve seat. The piece that holds it, the one that we're unscrewing. It's a valve seat, I believe. Valve seat. And that is supposed to have a hole in it. It does not. That main jet, or that emulsion tube, is what it's called, should come out. And we're going to just put a very small amount of downward pressure on it. Again, don't fight it too hard. There we go. Oh, wow. Okay, so I'll hold that up to the light and I'll show you what I'm talking about. That will never have ran, ever. I don't know if the camera is picking up on this. Let me zoom. See that like bronze, gold, and then there's a silver. Obviously this is the outside of the carburetor, but up in there is the inside of the carburetor. And you know that's where the fuel level sits. So whoever had this may have ran the tank dry, but the problem is that if you leave gas in the carb, I mean, it's going to do whatever damage it wants. Yeah, that is some, I don't know, 3 or 4 year old fuel maybe. give or take. Just a couple adjustment screws at the top. This one right here, this is the one I'm looking at. This is a pilot jet, and this is a pilot screw. This has to do with air-fuel mixture. This is the low speed idle adjustment. When it's not touching the screw is full throttle, and then when it goes and it rests on the screw, that's low idle. So you can, obviously the more open it is, the higher the throttle. So as it makes contact, you want to set that to your low speed idle. You don't necessarily have to take this out for what we're working on here, but to get this pilot jet out, it kind of holds pressure down on it. That's how the Honda and the Honda clones are. So if you don't know what it's set at, whatever it is, just drive it in until it seats lightly, and then take it all the way out. And then when you put it back in, seat it lightly, and then just count what you counted right here. So for example, let's go this. So a quarter, half, 3/4, 1 full turn, a quarter, half, 3/4, 2 full turns, 2 1/4, 2 1/2, 2 3/4. So let's say 2 3/4. So when I put this back in, I will lightly seat it, and then I will back it out 2 3/4 turns. So remember that, 2 3/4. Pop that pilot jet off. So other than that pilot screw, which, as you can see, this has a limiter on it, and it only turns, like 180 degrees in either direction. Just government regulation, they put that on there just so that way you can't be messing with it. So let's take a Dremel, we'll cut that off. I know it's pretty rebellious, but YOLO. If you don't have a Dremel, I highly recommend you get one. It might not come up in every project, but when it does, it is just absolutely clutch to have it. So you don't have a Dremel. I have one linked in the description if you're curious. All right, before I get that dropped in the ultrasonic cleaner, here is one of the best things that you can use as a carb cleaning tool. It's a bread twist tie. Anybody has it in their home, and you just kind of peel back some of that insulation, and it makes a perfect little bendable, I'm going to show you what I'm talking about, with the bright white light behind it. So right here, you remember this one? There should be a little hole. That is like 2 or 3 times the size that it was before. And then same thing with this emulsion tube. If you can see, there's only 2 holes that you can see, and there's like 6 holes that go along this. So I'll poke those out and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Let's see here, there's 4, there's 5, there's 4, and there's 5. A date with the ultrasonic cleaner is what it needs, but hopefully that just kind of gives you a visual of what kind of blockage was in this carb. It's kind of crazy. While that ultrasonic cleaner is cooking, I actually never checked the oil. So let's do that now. Let's get that oil dipstick out of there. Looks like it might have been a little overfilled. The oil does not look very good. Kind of tempted to just get a little bit of that drained out of there before we, throw that carb back on and fire it up. And let's get a little bit of that oil drained out, just a hair. I'm just keeping an eye on this right here, and as that kind of goes down, I'll just shove that plug back in. Let's just say that's good. We should have got 12 ounces, which is 350 milliliters for you metric folks. The whole metric in the United States thing is just really funny to me. I don't know why the United States doesn't do metric. It just makes so much more sense. Us Americans, we gotta complicate everything. I wanna take a look into that fuel tank. It looks absolutely wonderful. It is definitely not very good, but I will say that it is not the worst gas that I've ever seen. Much, much, much darker than normal standards. Let's get a little fresh stuff down there, just so that way we know that everything that's made its way through is nice and clean. It's the fresh stuff. It should be a light lime green. It already looks a million times better. All right, cool. So I'll let that kind of flesh itself through. I think that fuel system, besides putting the carb back together, is all good. Speaking of carb, the ultrasonic cleaner went off a few seconds ago. I will not be able to turn it on tonight. It is just about 10 o'clock. We have neighbors pretty close. I don't want to upset anybody. Let's check in on that carb. All right, let's get everything all put back together. If you notice that that like Bruce Banner gas is completely gone, which is awesome. I did have everything with a little bit of carb spray off camera just to get that simple green is what I use in that ultrasonic cleaner. I'd rather have a little bit of carb spray on there than simple green. But anyways, that's what I use. There's a lot of different things out there, a lot of good. Don't think that there's really only one. If you have an ultrasonic cleaner, or if you're thinking about getting an ultrasonic cleaner, just experiment with what you think you're gonna like and go from there. When you're tightening this back down, nothing crazy, just snug, lightly seated. I don't know if there's a technical terminology for it, but lightly seated. So this was the one that was 2 3/4. Okay, so lightly seated. That's 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. We can adjust that if needed. When you hold it upside down, if it's too up, it means you need a little bit more depth on it, or if it's too down, that will not close enough to let and it'll flood out. So sometimes when you do that, if you just blow in it the old musty way, and when it's upside down, if you blow in it, if it stops, that means it's good. Or when you tip it upside down the normal way, it should blow through it. All right, I don't know if I showed this in the beginning, but this did come with a box of all these goodies. That's gonna do it for tonight. Tomorrow morning, we're gonna make our way out here and we'll fire it up. I'm going to keep that gas off. I just have a weird thing about like leaks and stuff like that. We'll go through kind of like the power, just briefly, just like the power output stuff. Sometimes generators can do some damage if they're not set properly, or if they're running too high or too low. I'll see you in like 2 seconds. All right guys, it's the next night. Let's get some fuel in there and we'll fire it up and see what it sounds like. Okay, shout out to Honda. Honda, you're incredible. The GOAT. So all that smoke blowing out of there must have just been because that crankcase was a little bit filled. Who knows? Maybe there was just some, oil that made its way up into the cylinder. So that was thing one. Thing two, I will go through like the settings and how it's not putting out too much power or whatever. There's a lot more videos on that, so I'll just unpack a baseline of it. While that oil is hot, let's get that drained out of there. We'll get some fresh stuff in there and just make sure that it's at the correct level. There was a gasket that just fell off that, don't forget. There's no like fill line or anything like that. So what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna look up the oil capacity on Honda's website just so that way I kind of have a general idea. I don't wanna go too high or too low. Okay, so I looked it up on Honda's website. It's kind of hilarious. They just say just fill it till it gets to the top of the neck. There's no amount, there's no capacity, nothing. Fill it to the top of the neck. So that's what we're gonna do. I don't know if you can tell, it's about as full as we're going to go. Apparently Honda doesn't really care, so it's kind of like a power move on Honda's part. Like, they know what they have, like they're just flexing. So they're just like, you know what, as long as there's oil in it, like, it's all that really matters. So anytime you have a generator, you're going to want the hertz to be about 60. So at 3,600 RPM, it should be at 60 hertz. That's what you're gonna wanna run your equipment on. The engine has a governor, obviously. I think it's like 300 or 400 RPM it's good for, the governor, but the engine is only so big, so depending on what kind of a load you have on this, you're gonna wanna keep the hertz output in mind. What you run on the equipment is everybody's totally different. Not everybody knows, and it might fluctuate. You might be running more at one time or less at another time. But you want to make sure that you're relatively in line with 60 hertz. Most multimeters don't have a hertz measurement. This one does. You can see that little HZ right there. So that'll measure hertz. We'll put these two prongs in to the outlet and we'll look for 30 hertz. I'm sorry, not 30, 60 hertz. So we're gonna know. I'll also put a tachometer on the spark plug wire so that way I can just kind of show you the correlation. I'm gonna fire it up and then we'll measure the hertz. So if it's like 61 or 62 hertz, somewhere in there, we can safely assume that the RPMs are probably gonna be like, maybe 3,700, 3,650, somewhere in there. And then if it's in the high 50s, we're gonna know that the RPM is slightly below. So the hertz that are at 60 and 3,600 RPM, that's without a load, and obviously a generator without a load on it is kind of useless. You're gonna be generating power to something that you need to run. So it's okay if the hertz are a little bit plus or minus. You just don't want them way out of whack. So if they're at, under a heavy load, if it's at 59, something, that's okay. As long as it doesn't drop too low, that's what you want to pay attention to. Just adjusting the RPM and setting it at 3,600 and then moving on without understanding the load is not the correct way to adjust one of these things. You might see some stuff out there that say that, and that's, while it's relevant, it's not paying attention to the hertz is far more important of what it's putting out. So I'll do that. And I'm narrating this right now because when it's on, it's gonna be hard for me to talk. I'm gonna fire it up. We'll shove these things in. We'll see how many hertz it's outputting, and then I'll show you what that means for the RPM. I'll put a load on it with this heat gun. The max rated output or watts is, I think, 3,500. I think this will probably be, I don't know, maybe 1,000 or so. So I don't even know if we'll get quite up to half. But it's good if you do test it with a load on it. You want to try to maybe put half a load or 3/4 of a load. So if the max rated is 35, if you can find something in the 1,700 watt, 18, maybe 2,000 watt, that would be best. So we'll put that on too, and I'll kind of show you how it'll drop. Just for example, if we're at 62 and it's running fine, and then we we put this load on it of 1,000 watts, it might drop down to, you know, maybe 60 or 60.5, and that's what you're looking for, and that's what you want to make sure it's just. So if there's no load on it and it's running above 60, that's fine. You just want to make sure, again, I know I'm really belaboring this, you just want to make sure it doesn't drop below like 58, 57. You know, once it starts to get down, that's when you can, or if it's too high, right, 63, 64, 65, that could be troublesome. If you have any questions, email me, chrisxoutdoors@icloud.com. Instagram, Facebook, @chrisxoutdoors, comment below, whatever you want, and you know, we'll get this figured out. Okay, so hopefully that made sense. As predicted, when we first turned it on, it was at like 60, 62 hertz, something like that, and the engine RPM was a little bit above 3,600. I think it was like 3,660 or 3,650, something like that. When we put a load on it, it dropped down to about 60, so that's where you want to have it adjusted. So this, I didn't necessarily do any adjusting to this one, other than, you know, when you've seen me, most of them are going to have, it'll be in a different spot. Somewhere up by the engine, there will be a screw, Phillips head, flathead, whatever. You can dial those engine RPMs up or down to help you meet the hertz. So, you know, under good conditions, should it be at 36, maybe a little bit higher because you're going to want to compensate for that load? Yes, just make sure that you're not too far out of whack of around 60 hertz. The engine RPM is relevant, but if that's the only thing that you're looking at, you may have, you know, again, it depends on the load that's on it. So if you're at 3,600 RPM and you put a huge load on it, you know, that's going to drop, and your hertz coming out are going to be, you know, well down into the 50s, and that's not okay. Subsequently, if you're too high, you know, you just want to make sure that you're somewhere in a happy medium. And again, it helps if you know, if you have a consistent schedule of what you're running. Again, there's a lot of great videos out there on the subject. Just make sure whoever you're getting advice from is constantly hitting on the hertz output. If they're only focusing on our engine RPM, I would get different advice. You want that hertz to be in check. And if you want to know what's in that FedEx box, just follow me on Instagram at chrisxoutdoors. Send me a DM. I'll tell you what's in it, just to keep the suspense alive. All right, guys, that's going to do it for this one. Hopefully you got some value and some entertainment out of the video. I've linked a lot of the common tools that I use. Maybe I didn't use them in this video, but just, you know, ones that I frequently have my hands on in the description. If you like the video, remember to hit that thumbs up button. It really helps. I appreciate every single interaction that anybody has with this video. If you're into this sort of content, consider subscribing to the channel. I will do my darndest to bring value and entertainment to you. I promise. Until next time, remember, tomorrow is not guaranteed. Okay, so get out there, stop watching YouTube and go do something, go make something, go create something, and send me a message and let me know what it is. I really want to know.